Let's now have a look at some common questions and common issues with this question. So first question is gender. Here, yes, ideally you need to be tolerant, you need to be thoughtful, and you need to think of including more than two options. There are also differences whether you're talking about gender and about sex, then your list will be different. Some survey programs provide you a default setting for this, and then from then onwards, whether you stay with three options or you have more really depends on the goal of your survey. If the goal is to focus on diversity and diverse groups, then you might want to expand this other or refuse to answer option into more options to get more granularity. But for most surveys and more general topics, just this kind of option would be enough. So let's move on. The next question is, what age group do you belong to? Which of the following age groups describe you best? So here the issue is that, well, first of all, if a person is under 17, probably he or she shouldn't be completing the survey to begin with. Then let's say a person is in an age group 18 to 24. Again, it depends, of course, on the survey and on the context of the survey that you're creating. But if you think about it, a person at the age of 18, maybe finishing school, maybe just started the university, just moved out of their parents' house, or maybe living for 1 year already away, but really this is all fresh. Well, if we talk about people who are 23, 24 years old, they might have already moved out quite a while ago. It might be that they already have a bachelor's degree, maybe even a master's degree, maybe they're working or something else. So in this group we will have people who are very different from each other, and you just throwing them into one group if you create this age range here. Same story about people at the age of 25 to 34. So at around 25, people still might be studying or maybe starting their career, or maybe they took a break after studies and they're traveling around. Well, at the age of 30, of course, people are different. Some might be studying again or going back to school or still studying. Some might be working, some might be already married and having children. There are all kinds of possibilities, but the general trend would be that people are at rather different stages of life. If you talk about 25-year-olds and let's say 33, 34-year-olds. And you can keep going, and you will see, if you think along the same lines, you will realize that the same happens if you compare 35-year-olds to 40-year-olds, 40-year-olds to 50-year-olds, and so on and so forth. On top of it, it kind of looks like after the age of 55, it doesn't really matter how old you are. The life just stops, and this is not okay because, of course, again, like in the previous sections here, there is a huge difference between people who are in their 50s and in their 60s. And the thing is that you cannot really predict what might be relevant for you. And which kind of aspect you might be losing if you put people into boxes. So it's much better to come up with a question like this. So an open-ended question where a person has to just type in their response. If you think that collapsing people into age groups makes sense, you can of course do it afterwards, but at least you obtain all the information you can, and it takes about the same time to just type in two numbers as to click in. So let's answer and move on. Now we have a bunch of questions here, so it's pretty much the same question or the same type of information in its essence that we're trying to extract, and some way is better than the other, especially for some purposes. So for example, what social media platform do you use the most? If I am not an attentive respondent, I might just start ticking everything, because we're in a multiple question section here, so we have these boxes, and I will just click that I pick everything, Of course, I don't select everything. Let's say I don't use these three. So as a slightly inattentive respondent, I ignored the word most and I picked a couple of things. But this is not what you want to know. You want to know which social media is on top for me, if you think from a research perspective. All right, so the solution to this problem can be that you create a single choice question. So if I start clicking through, the dot disappears. So here I will, as an inattentive respondent, I'll think, aha, they want the one who is the most. Fine, let's say that's Instagram and move on. But what if it's TikTok or something else that's coming up? It might be that this list is also not extensive. This is something also to think about when you ask a question like this. Try to find a balance between finding a good number of options that you already provide plus the open field. For now, considering the popularity of TikTok, it makes sense to include this here, maybe also WhatsApp, because otherwise, if you don't do a good job on this list of options, you get a lot of open responses here, and then you will have to work with this raw data, with this text data to analyze it and try to quantify it, and that just adding more work to yourself. So think about these things in advance so that you have enough of good options, but don't get carried away. Don't pick any possible social media in this context that might be out there, because then the list will be just too long and people who will select this particular rare option might be not really relevant. So what you can also do, if the essence of your question is really to find out how much do I use different social media platforms, is to create this matrix question. And ask me, instead of what I'm using the most, is how much I'm using of different platforms. And here you can go from never at all, let's say Twitter is never or almost never, to Facebook all the time, and so on and so forth. So I can click like this. Now I'm also a YouTube user making videos and everything. So this would be something I would answer. Please have a look at this header here. So I created the 7-point scale starting from never and going to almost all the time. First of all, I did not include any intermediary options. So I just signaled on the anchors, and that is because, well, I didn't want to make my life more difficult. From a responder perspective, you will know if on the one end you have never and on the other all the time, that you will orient by these so-called anchors and move in one or another direction, trying to figure out where do you fall on this scale. If you start naming each and every point on the scale, it will be really hard to come up with something that is balanced enough that so that this point is really as much stronger, one step stronger than this one, and so on and so forth. And this one, of course, is easy because it's neutral in the middle. But on these intermediate points, it's really difficult and you don't need to do it. Now, of course, it's very important to think, what are the anchors? So these anchors are also usable, but not really ideal, because, well, what is all the time? Okay, I specified here multiple times a day, but maybe you want to go even deeper in this. So again, it depends on what you're actually trying to find out. If it's more of a general supplementary question that enriches your data, this kind of general structure with how much am I using of each social media, and from never to almost all the time, as multiple times a day might be enough. But if you're focusing on social media in your survey, you might consider getting into depth with this and defining this and here more, or maybe add supplementary follow-up questions on this one. But enough on that. Let's move on to the next question. So, what are your overall thoughts of McDonald's? Well, here I can write an essay, or I can just say great, cool, bad, nasty, whatever. And instead of so if you get this, then it will be really difficult for you as a researcher again to work through these kind of answers. So if you have a clue of what the overall thoughts of a consumer might be, give a couple of options and then maybe a supplementary box, because then you already have half of the job done. You created some categories and you don't have to struggle through a ton of text, and you standardize your answers a little bit, because as I said, some people will write a word or two and the other ones will pour their souls here. So open questions, think twice before you use them, and use them as a supplement, as the possibility, as a means of giving possibility to your participants to say something else that they would like to tell you. Let's move on to the next typical question. So which country do you currently reside in? And then I have a drop down menu and it's crazy. So this is also a default question that is common in many survey platforms, where you have a drop down and you don't of course have to come up with every country. There's already everything preloaded, but then you start looking and so on and so forth, and unless you have a very wild international survey, you don't actually need this list of over 100 countries. You know where most of your participants are coming from, so you can give a couple of options and then add other on top of it. And then again, it's easier. So at the end of this video, we will have a look what actually happens if you have these questions, how the data looks like and what struggles are there coming. And this is a pain. So if you do not run an international survey, and you know most of you can imagine and can predict what will be the most popular countries, list those and add an open box for a wild card that will fly in and fill out a survey from some funky exotic country. Moving next. So here we have a question asking us to indicate an overall opinion of Netflix subscription by selecting one of the following options. And we start with very satisfied to very dissatisfied. And it is vertical and I do not like it. And many researchers will agree with me. First of all, because we are used to read and to look at the information in a horizontal way. So if you can place the scale in a horizontal way as well. This, for example, does not work for mobile versions. So if you have a look here, that's how it will look identical here, but on the next question we will see the difference. But here, if I am completing it on a computer screen, then it's nicer to have it horizontally, because then I know, okay, if I go right, that is higher. That is also another thing to look at. Like this, it's really confusing, and I'm starting with very satisfied and I'm ending with that dissatisfied. The only positive thing for creating a survey in this order is when you're trying to push people to say that they're satisfied. Then of course start with the positive thing. Maybe they will not read until the end of the list and they will just stay on the happy side of the scale. But generally, if you have a scale, use a horizontal one and start on the left with the negative and on the right with the positive. So from left to right it will go up, the higher and the better. Like this. So you have extremely dissatisfied on this end and extremely satisfied on this end. And if we have a look, we see that on the mobile version it still stays vertical, but this is mostly the problem of the screen and the size of the fold. So, but on the computer, if you can do it like this, on the off chance that your participants are completing a survey in the computer, you have a nice layout. And on the smartphone, it doesn't really matter. It will be vertical anyways. And that is all for the questions. So now let's jump in and have a quick look at the data and how it would look like. So here is the data already exported into Excel. You have this, you will be working with data that will look more or less like this. in the further sessions. But now let's have a quick look at the answer options. So we had this question that said, what social media platform do you use the most? And this was a multiple choice questions. Remember the one where I had to click in and I could click in anything, and that's what I did. And then you have everything in one column, so this is really messy. You will have to split it into columns to start working with it, and it will be messy even more because you will have some ones here starting, and then it will be a 3 as a first item, so it will not be aligned. It's a mess. If you can not use multiple questions, don't do it, because it will require extra work in Excel. In some other programs, it already splits you into different columns, so then you will have a separate column for each, but then you will have missing values because some of the columns will be empty simply because some people picked all 5 options and some only 3 and some only 1. So here is a single choice question, and here are the opponents. No, sorry, that's the opponents from the previous one. And this is how the single choice question looks like. So we have numbers. We can convert them, of course, and we'll learn how to do that. But for now, we can jump back to our survey interface and see, we have Facebook as 1 and Instagram as 3, and this is our categorical variable. So the numbers have no meaning except Instagram is 3 and Facebook is 1. And here's my open field with TikTok, Snapchat, and WhatsApp. So here it's already a nice nominal variable, and we know it's the social media that the person uses the most. Let's move on to the next question. And this was the battery, where we could indicate how often we use each of the social media platforms that is named. So for this kind of question, our output will look the following way. You will have a column for Facebook, a column for Twitter, and Instagram, and so on and so forth. So basically a column for each item on this menu. And in our cells, we will have numbers, and these numbers will represent these items here, the points from never to all the time. And that's another reason why it's nice to go from negative here, because never will be 1, and positive here because it will be 7. And then it's rather intuitive to see, okay, which one is higher, and which one is higher means better. So we can quickly calculate the mean of our platforms and have a look which one is winning. So it looks like in the data that I faked right now, Instagram is the winner with the highest average. And this is how you would work with the scale data. But of course, we will get closer to this in the following sessions. In general, you should imagine how this will look in your data, and so that you can actually analyze it afterwards and make sense out of it. Let's move on to the next question. And this is our overall attitude towards McDonald's. Here, I did not try to imagine anything, so this field is empty, but in the real case scenario, it either will be empty or will have some information in it. As I said, maybe some short words or maybe an essay. Next question, list of countries. And here you see again, we have numbers of countries. We will then need to convert all the numbers to names so that it makes sense. It's not very difficult technically to do, but if you have over 140 countries, that's gonna take a while, and it's really not necessary, as I said. Now let's have a look at Netflix. And here we had the first question where it was phrased vertically and start from very satisfied, which will be 1, and finishing with very dissatisfied, which is 4. And that's what we have here. And again, the higher number would mean worse. The more complex analysis you do, the more difficult it will be to remember that and keep that in your head, that the higher is worse and not better. So don't do it. Now it's kind of neither nor. Okay, we have rather on the positive side, because probably when I was generating some of the data for this example, I thought, okay, I'll just click on the top numbers, and that's also something that I already mentioned. And here we have a scale, and it works just exactly the same way as in our matrix that we just worked with here. And here we see, okay, some people clicked 7, that is maximum. Some clicked 5, that is on the positive side, but close to the middle. So again, all very positive things, and we can quickly look at the average here at 6.5. So this is a fantastic score for Netflix. So we will keep working with the data further, and once you start working with it yourself, you will see that some questions are more difficult to handle than other ones, and these are the things that you should keep in mind when you're creating a survey. And this is exactly the reason why the survey creation of the survey task will come later in this course.